Over the course of many generations, the Pokemon universe, which heavily draws inspiration from the real natural world, has used the same types of animals multiple times. I like to ponder upon how these similar Pokemon species would interact, particularly as part of the same team. As such, I've planned a couple of different animal-themed teams to see how viable such a concept can be. The first of which is a horse team, by which I mean a team of Pokemon that are based on horses or close relatives of horses. I assembled my horse team and took to Pokémon Showdown for approximately 115 battles, and then logged the data to analyze just how effective they, and I, are as a herd. Before we get to the results, I'll introduce you to our horse team and go over the general plan for each member. To be blunt, there were just enough different Pokemon species for a horse team to work. However, since Rapidash was a must-have on this team, I had to cheat a bit conceptually by including it. Rapidash is not available in Generation 9, so you can't ever replicate this horse team in Scarlet and Violet. Also, we're only using fully evolved Pokemon, as not fully evolved Pocket Monsters usually don't fare as well in battle. We want to see how much we can win with a horse-only team. With that said, let's get to our team composition. Zebstrika. First up is our most frequent lead, Zebstrika. While not a true horse, zebras are pretty close, right? As for Zebstrika's set, we have given it a light clay for its item, the ability Sap Sipper. Its Terra type is Flying. For the moveset we have Light Screen, Thunder Wave, Taunt, and Volt Switch. And in terms of stats, we have specialized them into having as much HP and speed as possible. We're going to be using Zebstrika to either set up a Light Screen, it sadly can't learn or reflect, or to debuff the opponent's lead by paralyzing them with Thunder Wave, or taunting them to prevent any dangerous setups. Depending on how much we can get away with, the plan is to Volt Switch out the moment Zebstrika can't gain us any more advantages. Its Sap Sipper ability also makes it great for forcing out grass types in some situations, albeit rarely. Zebstrika doesn't have very good offensive stats, so we don't expect to get many knockouts with it. This steed is purely for utility. Zebstrika is in the Zero Used ZU metagame tier, so my hopes for it weren't the highest, but it was a decent lead in the majority of situations. For those who don't know, the Zero Use tier is exactly what it sounds like, full of Pokemon that are essentially used 0 times in competitive battling. Sort of. From top to bottom usage stats, the order of metagame tiers goes Uber, overused Pokemon too powerful for other tiers, OU, for overused, UU, for underused, RU, rarely used, NU, never used, PU, perfectly useless, and then ZU. While usage tiers don't necessarily equate to how good a Pokemon is in battle, it does represent how easy a Pokemon is to use effectively for most people. There's also a strong correlation between a Pocket Monster's usage tier and its stats, move pool, and more. So yeah, we're going to need to be creative with our movesets and strategies so that we don't have long losing streaks. Rapidash. Next up is the original horse unicorn Pokemon, Rapidash. I've always liked Rapidash, so it'll be fun to use it on this team. For its set, we have given it a Choice Scarf as an item, the ability Flash Fire, Ground as its Terra type, and for moves it has Flare Blitz, Quick Attack, Wild Charge, and Mega Horn. For stats, we have specialized it into having as much attack and speed as possible. I've ended up utilizing Rapidash as a revenge killer due to how it fits in with the rest of the team. With a Choice Scarf, almost nothing can outspeed it without buffs, even the majority of other Choice Scarf users. With Quick Attack, Rapidash is all but guaranteed to knock out any Focus Sash users left on 1 HP, or other similarly weakened threats. Enemies that were just slightly too tough for the previous Horse Team member to take down often get cleared out with Rapidash's high risk, high reward moveset. However, I noticed frequently that opponent trainers would underestimate both Rapidash's physical power and speed. This allowed it to punch, or kick, above its tier class and come out on top in more situations than I initially thought it would. A nice surprise. As mentioned before, Rapidash is not in Scarlet or Violet, so it's not in any existing metagame tiers. Back in Sword and Shield, the last games where it was catchable, it was in ZU, Zero used, just like Zipstrika. Mudsdale. Now we have Mudsdale, one of our team's physical sweepers as well as a decent tank. We've given our Mudsdale leftovers for its item, stamina for its ability, fighting for its terror type. As for its moves, we've given it Body Press, Earthquake, Stone Edge, and Curse. In terms of stat distribution, we focused mostly on giving our Mudsdale lots of HP and attack. The plan for Mudsdale was to send it out against an opponent who would use physical attacks, soak up the damage, and then counter-attack. And turns out that after a few stamina triggers and curses, Mudsdale can out-heal physical damage from weaker moves, like priority ones. This allowed Mudsdale to survive more attacks than the opponent thought possible, and come back stronger. If I could find an ideal time to set up Mudsdale with at least one curse, it would sweep more often than not. The best such time is when an opponent has no more special attackers left. Even super effective physical moves, like those from water, grass, or ice types, don't usually one-shot Mudsdale. The reliable bulk feels appropriate for this workhorse's design and concept. Mudsdale, somehow, is in PU, the metagame tier just above ZU. Due to how well Mudsdale performed on our horse team, I genuinely think people are missing out on a great ground type tank and potential physical sweeper. You'll see why soon. Glastrier. Following up is Glastrier, the second and last of our horse team's physical sweepers. We've given Glastrier a choice band and chosen the ability Chilling Neigh, as well as given it the Steel Terra type. For moves it has High Horsepower, Icicle Crash, Close Combat, and Heavy Slam. In terms of stats, it's quite similar to Mudsdale in that we focused on giving it tons of HP and attack. Like with Mudsdale, we're using Glastrier's high HP, attack, and defense stats to make the most of its time in battle. However, as opposed to setting up any buffs, we went down the choice band route so that Glastrier could more likely one-shot opponents. We went with choice band over sword stance for offensive tactics so that we wouldn't need a turn to set up. Even though Glastrier has decent physical bulk, it can't reliably tank more than one mighty blow like Mudsdale can. This was crucial for this team, as, for the most part, we don't have many good options for facing bulky dragon-type threats. If it wasn't for Glastrier's potential to one-shot such Pokemon, this team would have fared far worse than it did during testing. On a similar train as most of our teams so far, Glastrier is in the ZU metagame tier. It can only deliver solid results if used in a few ideal situations. However, when you recognize those situations, it's much easier to make use of Glastrier in battle than you'd think. A lot of people joke about the ineffectiveness of bulky ice types, but frankly, we think that's nonsense. Glastrier was a great addition to our horse team and netted us lots of KOs, which we'll show you soon. Spectrier. Here's our team's special sweeper. We gave our Spectrier Focus Sash, for an item, the Grim Neigh ability, Dark Terra type, and the moves we gave it were Shadow Ball, Dark Pulse, Draining Kiss, and Nasty Plot. In terms of stat distribution, we focused on giving Spectrier tons of special attack and speed. With excellent special attack and speed stats backed up by the Grim Neigh ability, Spectrier is definitely the most dangerous member of our horse team. For the most part, we used Shadow Ball and Dark Pulse to blast through opposing Pokemon. However, when there was a moment to spare, we would buff with Nasty Plot, which allows Spectrier to one-shot pretty much anything that doesn't have a Focus Sash or special defense buffs. On the topic of Focus Sashes, putting one on Spectrier guarantees that it can land either a crucial attack or buff with Nasty Plot, which are traits that are vital for a special glass cannon. What's more, Draining Kiss allowed us to heal when possible to extend sweeps. Understandably for its immense power, Spectrier is in the Uber metagame tier. While Spectrier is a must-have for our team, this complicated things a bit, as to have it legally on our horse team, we had to perform all of our testing in National Dex Ubers, a tier full of the strongest Pokemon in the franchise. With a team full of ZU Pokemon, it's going to be challenging. Keldeo. Last but not least is our utility special attacker. We gave Keldeo Resolute a red card for an item, the Justified ability, Water for its Terra type, and for moves we gave it Secret Sword, Hydro Pump, Air Slash, and Calm Mind. In terms of stat distribution, it's quite similar to our Spectrier in that we gave it lots of special attack and speed. We didn't initially want to use Keldeo, as we're not the biggest fans of its design, but there was no other option. Out of the entire Pokemon franchise, there was not another horse or horse-like Pokemon we could use without bending the rules for our self-imposed challenge in an unsatisfying way. Our plan for Keldeo was to make it versatile while also being an alternate lead to Zebstrika if the opponent's lineup threatens us with a ground type lead. On top of that, we used Keldeo's red card item to force out buffed enemies, its Justified ability to hard counter dark types, and a Calm Mind moveset featuring Secret Sword to catch foes off guard. In terms of metagame tiers, Keldeo is in UU. To be blunt, it's there due to a fair bit of potential, but doesn't reach the more used tiers because it's outclassed by easier to use water type powerhouses like Kyogre and Dondozo. However, it did well on our team, so we have no complaints. Testing. For our battle test, we had to go to National Dex Ubers, as Spectrier isn't allowed in less used tiers like OU and UU, and because Rapidash isn't in Scarlet and Violet. This means that our horse team, composed of 3 ZU, 1 PU, 1 UU, and 1 Uber Pokemon, will need to hold their own against teams made mostly, or entirely, from Uber Pokemon. We were initially a bit worried about this, so before setting our sets in stone, we ran about 10 pre-test battles to iron out the kinks. The sets we showed you are the final sets for each team member. Afterward, we engaged in the true testing, 100 battles in National Dex Uber tier on Pokémon Showdown. It took roughly 8 hours total, which, combined with the logging and analyzation time, resulted in about 13 hours of research. With that said, these 13 hours do not include the time it took to write and edit this video. All this work to see whether or not our horse team was viable. 13 hours well spent. Please give this video a like, drop a comment below, or consider subscribing if you appreciate all the time and effort we put into this video. Anyways, on to the test battles. Keep in mind that there is some human error involved in our win-loss ratio, as we're not perfect. We made mistakes, but battle after battle, we learned from our misplays and made fewer. We excluded most opponent forfeits, but kept the battle data for ones that we were sure would have resulted in a win for us if the opponent didn't leave. We ourselves forfeited only once in 115 battles or so, and we kept this data. Everyone gets salty once in a while, right? Main team weaknesses. Overall, our horse team performed the worst against opponent teams featuring powerful water types, as our horse team doesn't have great options for countering water types. Zebstrika, even with a type advantage, could not take down water type foes very well. That, plus the general lack of grass type moves for our horse team members, resulted in this unfortunate weak point. Primal Kyogre and Dracofish were 2 of the water type threats that bothered us the most. Furthermore, at times when Glastrier was knocked out, our team suffered against dragon type enemies. Spectrier's Draining Kiss was able to help a bit against such threats, but not enough to fully negate a buffed dragon type foe, especially if it terastallized into a different type. The bane of our team was Zygarde's complete form. Moreover, potent Dragon Dance users like Roaring Moon, Dragapult, and Haxorus also gave us trouble. Main team strengths. As for where we succeeded, we did very well against most other opposing Pokemon. The variety of our team's typing made it relatively easy to go toe-to-toe with even the most formidable opponents. Our refined sets were designed to take advantage of the many oversights implemented by trainers who solely focus on offense and nothing else. A lot of the time, we gained huge advantages from people either underestimating or simply not knowing about our horses. We made use of our opponent's lack of knowledge as much as possible. Zebstrika was a decent lead. There are 3 main areas where you want your lead to specialize. As a hyper-offensive threat to take out your opponent's lead and net an early Pokemon count advantage, as a debuffer who cripples foes with statuses and sets of hazards, or as a buffer that gives your team some sort of passive enhancement like setting up screens. For us, Zebstrika is a hybrid of the last 2. Taunt and Thunder Wave were excellent moves that disabled the majority of opponents' leads, after which we would Volt Switch to another of our horses to press the assault or regroup if things were not going well. However, after the initial part of the battle, Substrika was still useful as a way to stop foes from using status moves, or preventing a sweep from a fast threat by paralyzing them. On the rare occasion, Substrika's Sap Sipper ability allowed us to switch into Grass-type threats aimed at Mudsdale or Keldeo to throw a wrench in our adversaries' plans. Rapidash was a fairly effective revenge killer, as the majority of opponents did not expect Rapidash to outspeed their Pokemon. With Quick Attack, it was especially easy to clear out enemies with less than 10% HP in most cases. What's more, Rapidash's Flash Fire was perfect for switching into Fire-type attacks launched at Glastrier, and then counterattacking with a boosted Flare Blitz. Rapidash's Wild Charge and Mega Horn also caught a few foes off guard, which scored us some crucial knockouts here and there. Mudsdale was able to demolish many teams because opponents would unwisely choose to use neutral physical attacks against our ground-type workhorse. Doing so only buffed Mudsdale's defense, which allowed it to tank hits even better and punish certain threats with a devastating body press, especially if it terrestrialized into a fighting type. If a foe didn't have a Toxic user or a special attacker, Mudsdale would make quick work of their team. Stone Edge and Earthquake were consistent tools for taking out plenty of threats, which Curse improved. Glastrier was our designated Dragon Slayer, an important role when entering the Uber tier, as, to put it plainly, here be dragons. Not only was Stab Icicle Crash devastating to Draconic foes, but it was also useful against pretty much everything else, even opponent Pokemon that resisted Ice-type moves. This was thanks to the combined effects of the Choice Band, the Stab Boost, the Chilling Neigh ability, Glastrier's naturally high attack stat, and the general usefulness of Ice-type moves for offense. Coverage moves like High Horsepower, Close Combat, and Heavy Slam helped Glastrier defeat ice-resistant enemies quicker, which increased our Ice Horse's longevity. Heavy Slam was particularly effective against Fairy types, as Glastrier weighs a hefty 800 kilograms, which is about 1,700 pounds, and most Fairy types are very light. To put this into perspective, the usual matchup between Glastrier and a Fairy type enemy resulted in Heavy Slam's base power being either 100 or 120. Spectrier was a force to be reckoned with whenever it hit the battlefield. Even unbuffed, its Shadow Ball and Dark Pulse attacks would either severely injure or outright knock out many foes. Hilariously, when panicked, many people switched to their Steel type to counter Spectrier. But these opponents forgot that Steel type has not resisted Ghost or Dark type moves since Generation 5. In fact, the only type of Pokemon that gave Spectrier worry were Dark types, as we couldn't take them out unless we buffed with Nasty Plot and then used Draining Kiss. Thanks to Grimnay's passive buffs, when Spectrier landed a knockout, it became even deadlier. If it hadn't taken damage yet, it would even be able to survive an otherwise fatal incoming attack because of Focus Sash. Keldeo was particularly great at catching people off guard. No one expected the red card, so it was relatively easy to force out opponent Pokemon when we needed to do some damage control or simply mess with the foe's plans. Switching into enemies targeting Spectrier with a Dark type attack was handy for both forcing a switch out and gaining an attack boost from Justified. We didn't use such buffs as we had a special set for Keldeo, but it made opponents think otherwise. This, in turn, was great for tricking opponents into sending in a physically defensive Pokemon, only for Keldeo to unleash a mighty Stab Hydro Pump against it. Secret Sword, which is a special move that uses an opponent's defense stat instead of its special defense stat during damage calculations, allowed us to do the opposite as well by helping us take out specially defensive threats. Many people confuse Secret Sword and Sacred Sword, the latter of which is a physical attack that ignores defense and evasion stat changes, so we definitely took advantage of this confusion. When possible, we would use Calm Mind to further increase Keldeo's potency in battle. Thanks to Keldeo's overall decent stats, they were a solid utility special attacker for our horse team. While battling our way through hordes of legendary and mythical Pokemon, we also got quite a few compliments from other Pokémon Showdown users regarding our team. People seemed to like horses in general, which was nice to learn. Results. We put together a detailed spreadsheet on Google Sheets, which we have linked in the description. You can view it but cannot change anything. However, feel free to make a copy of it for your own testing needs. We'll break down the data into a bunch of categories. However, some of them would be a bit dull to cover in a video, so please check out our spreadsheet for the knockout margin, which is the average of knockouts that occurred per battle, with negative values meaning knockouts on our team, and positive numbers meaning knockouts on the opponent's team. In addition, we logged time taken per battle, funny opponent comments, and interesting miscellaneous notes. Furthermore, since we've already discussed the main weaknesses and strengths of this team, we'll exclude covering the reasons for our wins and losses as it would be redundant. However, if you check out our spreadsheet and don't understand something, please leave a comment and ask us about it. We read all your comments, so we'll get back to you as soon as possible with answers. With that said, we'll discuss knockout totals for each horse team member and our overall win-loss ratio with this team. Knockout totals. Substrika, our main lead, only knocked out 7 opponent Pokemon throughout 100 test battles. This is not surprising or disappointing, as we planned from the start to use Substrika for utility and not much else. Keldeo had the second least amount of knockouts at 43. Again, this is due to Keldeo's usage as a utility member more than an attacker. We needed more utility than offense from a water and fighting type on our horse team. If we specialized Keldeo into being more offensive, it would have scored more knockouts, but that wasn't a huge priority for this team due to its composition. Rapidash, our revenge killer, picked up 60 knockouts. This was a bit less than expected given the nature of Rapidash's set and purpose. However, it was still crucial in attaining many victories, as ending lingering threats greatly improved our odds of success in the majority of battles with this team. Glastrier comes in 3rd place for total Pokemon opponent knockouts at 76. Again, this was a bit lower than expected, but it wasn't a big deal. On average, Glastrier scored about 1 knockout every battle, most of the time against a fearsome Dragon-type threat. As such, the quality of Glastrier's knockouts means more than the quantity. Mudsdale, our faithful tank, comes in 2nd place with 93 faux knockouts. We were able to sweep lots of teams with its resilient bulk, as long as there were no special attackers around. Mudsdale was the biggest cause for opponent forfeits, as they would see our ground-type steeds slowly plowing through their team and opted to leave instead of facing inevitable defeat. Spectrier was our team's most proficient offensive member with 143 knockouts across 100 battles. As such, we're declaring it our team's MVP, as we will not have obtained nearly as many victories without it. The Grimnay and Nasty Plot boosted sweeps were fast and fearsome. Almost nothing could stop it once it gained momentum, even more so than with Mudsdale. Win-loss ratio. In the end, we won 46 battles and lost 54. That gives us a win rate of 46%. This is nothing to write home about by any means. On average, the best VGC players in the world have over 70% win rates with their ideal teams. However, things become more impressive as we look at a few facts. Firstly, there's only one Uber tier Pokemon on our team, Spectrier. Keldeo is UU and Mudsdale is PU, with the other 3 resting in ZU. Again, we want to stress that usage tiers do not equate to how good a Pokemon is in battle. They merely exemplify how easy it is for the average trainer to use a Pokemon effectively, for the most part. For an excellent example, look at Nikhil Reddy's Articuno in the Urch VGC event, which helped him win a crucial battle. Articuno is technically in ZU, like much of our team, which proves that most U's doesn't mean best. If we played a bit better, we estimated that we could have gotten our win rate up to around maybe 50% at our skill level. A better trainer could probably raise that up to 60%. With that said, it's still not world class tier, so don't expect to see our horse team in any VGC event finals. Comparisons aside, our horse team did better than expected. We assumed that we would only reach a 30% to 40% win rate, so we cleared our own goal marker by a fair margin. Conclusion. Don't forget that Rapidash is unavailable in Scarlet and Violet, so this team, as it stands, is not usable in its current state. You'd have to swap Rapidash for something else. Maybe a Camerupt? It's in Scarlet and Violet. Camels are not the most dissimilar to horses. But still, It just wouldn't feel right, would it? Anyways, let's summarize things neatly to answer the overarching question. Is a horse team viable for Pokemon battling? For actual tournaments? Probably not. Water types and dragon types are too common, and they give this team a lot of trouble, so you're not likely to make it very far. For casual battling, yes, it's viable. Most casual teams can be viable on simulators or against your friends, since you won't encounter the most hardcore players in such settings. An approximate win rate of 50% is more than enough to have fun with this team. You won't win a ton of battles, but you certainly won't lose that many either. We've put a Pastebin link in the description if you want to import our horse team into Pokémon Showdown. We had a great time putting together this video, despite the large amount of time and effort that went into this project. We hope that you enjoyed watching it. If you did, please consider liking, leaving a comment to share your thoughts, or maybe even subscribing if you want to see more content like this. Right now, we have another animal team idea in the works. Next up, a dog team. However, it'll be a little while before that video is ready. If you want to make sure that you don't miss it, you should subscribe to our channel. Thank you so much for watching. See you in the next video, fellow trainers.